Head of Human Resources. We're also joined by the following officials from the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications: Mr. Dennis Maher, Principal Officer. So to begin with, I'm going to call on the Controller General, Seamus McCarthy, for his opening statement.
Inland Fisheries Ireland was established in 2010, amalgamating the previous regional fisheries boards with the Central Fisheries Board. Its remit is to protect, manage and conserve Ireland's inland fisheries and sea angling resources. IFI's income in 2021 amounted to €31.7 million. This was down from €36.9 million in 2020. Around three-quarters of the income comes from Exchequer grant funding, and the grant income was down in 2021, mainly to reduce IFI's high cash balance at the end of 2020. IFI expenditure in 2021 amounted to €36.8 million, and that this was up from €33.9 million in 2020. Over 70% of expenditure, or €26.6 million, was in respect of remuneration and other pay costs. €8.6 million was spent on operations, with €1.6 million on administration. I certified the 2021 financial statements on the 29th of March 2023 and issued a clear audit opinion. However, I drew attention to a number of items in my audit report. First, I drew attention to certain governance concerns. The chairperson of the IFI board resigned in April 2022. A new chairperson was appointed in May 2022 and resigned in January 2023. There were a further 4 resignations from the board during 2022 and in January 2023. As a result, the board became unable to reach the required quorum to meet and to make decisions, including approval of the annual financial statements. In February 2023, the remaining board members were removed by the Minister for the Environment, Climate and Communications on a no-fault basis, and 2 persons were appointed for a period of up to 6 months to perform the functions of IFI pending the reconstitution of the board. A number of disclosures were made in 2022 to the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications and to IFI. These disclosures resulted in the commissioning of a succession of reviews and reports. The statement on internal control outlines the status of these reviews at the date of signing of the financial statements. Following one internal review, the Chief Executive reported a potential fraud to An Garda Síochána in 2022. Due to an administration error, 16 vehicles leased by IFI in 2021 were uninsured for a period. The matter only came to light when one of the vehicles was involved in a road traffic accident. IFI anticipates that illegal action may be taken against it over the incident. The financial liability accruing from the accident was uncertain at the time the audit was being signed off. Finally, I drew attention to a change in the Chief Executive's normal place of work from IFI's headquarters in Donegal to the regional office in Ballyshannon in November 2021. This has implications for the claiming of expenses by the Chief Executive. We found no contemporaneous written record of the proposal for the work location change or of its financial implications, or of a decision in that regard by the board, which is responsible for setting the terms and conditions of the Chief Executive. The number and complexity of the issues that have arisen in IFI contributed to a delay in the completion of the audit of the 2021 annual financial statements. The audit of the 2022 annual financial statements is currently in progress, and I expect earlier completion of that work. Separately, my office is further examining a number of control and value for money issues in IFI, and I may present a report on any significant findings from that work if that is warranted.
Thanks, Seamus. And Mr. O'Donnell, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement. You wish to proceed?
Okay, imagine why I cairlach agus a teachtaí dálaí. Mai agat a sucht an deis a bheith lethar an seániu gan éon cistne chuí a ragart a tá bonseacha le íoscach in Siréireann agus an ráiteas airgeideas don bhliain fios a héan. Ba bhhaile a chóir an niúil a dús baia don ggóirle go bhfuil sé rinse ag íoscach in Siréireann a bheith oscailte agus go dtí an bonse aniu. Mana bhfuil ma deabhal a cistne a ragart, dóirí muid freagraí a bhórm scrífa cho lua agus is féidir. Thank you, Deputy Stanley and the Committee, for the opportunity to appear before you today and discuss our annual report for 2021 and financial statements. I am joined by supporting witnesses Barry Fox, Head of Operations, Suzanne Campion, Head of Finance and Corporate Services, Dr. Cal Gallagher, Head of Research and Development, and Roisin Bradley, Head of Human Resources. I will keep my remarks to some overarching topics and relevant issues regarding the financial statements and accounts for 21. We're a team of just over 300 full-time staff, comprising fisheries protection staff, development staff, environmental officers, research staff, and very importantly, an excellent administrative backup team. I am very grateful to our passionate and accomplished employees who see their roles as a vocation. Many have given decades of dedicated public service to Inland Fisheries Ireland and are national and international specialists in their respective fields. In 2021, our protection and environmental teams were extremely active in addressing illegal fishing, pollution incidents, fish kills, habitat destruction in and around freshwater systems across Ireland. IFI delivered over 167,000 hours of anti-poaching patrolling activities. We concluded 82 cases for fisheries offences and commenced a further 103 cases in 2021. We also concluded 23 cases for environmental offences and commenced a further 13 cases in the same period. Most of the latter were associated with fish kills and serious water pollution incidents. In 2021, IFI carried out river habitat restoration on 21 kilometres of river channel, treated 11 hectares of lake infested with lager siphon, an alien invasive aquatic plant species that has serious ecological impacts and may spread to other water bodies, and carried out maintenance on 34 kilometres of river channel habitat. In the same year, IFI staff audited 2,800 angler access structures and carried out maintenance on 510 structures to ensure that the public were safe. This is just a snapshot of what we did in 2021. IFI, like all public service organisations, must adhere to the highest standards in governance. IFI has made governance mistakes, which has overshadowed the excellent public service that we provide. The shortcomings in terms of good governance, for which we apologise today, were not delivered and not deceitful in any way. Today we welcome this opportunity to explain the causes of these issues and provide the requisite background and context to the committee. It is important for the public to know this. Following extensive internal reviews of processes and procedures and associated remedial action, IFI is operating within a very strong corporate governance environment. The external governance review of IFI will commence shortly, and our Section 18 board appointees are overseeing this process. This will strengthen IFI governance processes to a very high standard. Separately, but in addition to these significant operational risks, we discovered alleged fraud within IFI in 2022, and this is now subject to a criminal investigation by Garda Síochána. I believe this occurred over a significant amount of time in Inland Fisheries Ireland, but does not pertain to any serving staff member of IFI. The investigation also relates to the harassment and intimidation of the executive over a 17-month period, and this has taken its toll on my colleagues across IFI. I will endeavour to brief you all to the best of my ability on this issue. As this is a live Garda investigation, I will remain cautious in this matter. Inland Fisheries Ireland is overstretched and has been for a long time. Since 2009, our staffing complement has been reduced by 30%. We have the statutory responsibility for Ireland's 74,000 kilometres of rivers and streams, together with 128,000 hectares of lake systems. We patrol a coastline of 9,700 kilometres and patrol the marine environment out to 12 nautical miles from the baselines. Our area of operation is extensive. We face a significant operational challenges, especially the lack of staffing in specialist areas that impedes our ability to respond more effectively and efficiently to the pressing needs of an environmental agency in an ever-changing ecological world. These challenges are not an excuse for mistakes that have been made. The challenges are, however, a reality. Minister Ryan himself stated that IFI needs to be adequately resourced to build and sustain capacity for both existing functions and an enhanced role. 2021 was a very challenging year for IFI due to COVID-19 restrictions and the last 18 months have been equally difficult for the organisation. Climate change, the pollution of our water bodies, the destruction of freshwater and terrestrial habitats, the proliferation of non-native invasive species, and the impacts of aquaculture on migrating salmonids is making our role extremely challenging as an environmental organisation. I myself was born in 1971. Wild salmon numbers returning to Ireland in that year were 1.2 million. In 2022, that number was reduced to 171,000, a reduction of 86%. Arctic char, a species that were encountered by the first inhabitants of this island, are now extinct from Lough Conn, County Mayo, and facing a similar fate in other lake systems. The freshwater eels that were once prolific in the streams that we played in as children are now facing extinction. Wild brown trout lakes across Ireland are disappearing due to the introduction of non-native species and the pollution associated with excessive farming practices. IFI must be expanded and strengthened so we can deliver on all that is required of us by extant national legislation and the ever-increasing burdens of EU directives and regulations. Those regulations serve to protect nature. Nature has no voice other than the human one. I am very proud of the progressive and innovative work that we do and the value it gives to the state, to our citizens and to the resource we protect. IFI could not do this without our committed staff, stakeholder support and the excellent support we receive daily from our parent department, the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communication. Just to finish, Chair, I and my team will address the committee's oral questions and will share with you any written information that members request in this session at the first available opportunity. Chair, thank you and the committee for your attention this morning.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. So the first committee member this morning is Deputy Mark Cossig with 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thanks to the witnesses for appearing today and for the opening statement. It's unfortunate we've no board members here today, but that's where we find ourselves. We have an organisation that is receiving 27 million in terms of exchequer funding. It doesn't have a functioning board in place, and you come here to PAC today to ask for an expansion in your services, or that's this part of the narrative. I was preparing for today and I asked somebody where the IFI was headquartered. I didn't know the building. The reply I got was it's halfway between Ballymagash and Kilnascully. Now, that is not a good look for an organisation that's making a case here for increased staffing, increased funding. And I mean, a lot of the issues that we're going to address here, they sit very comfortably in the world of either Dunbelievables or Hall's Pictorial Weekly, if I'm honest about it. Like, even the corporate slogan invites an element of satire. It's about the fish, you know. The protective crews aren't getting out when they should do. We don't have the trained rib drivers to get out at the night time. We've invasive species that are left get out of hand before they're brought back under control. We've lapsed insurance policies that aren't noticed until there's a crash. We've property leasing arrangement to employees that could be described as loose as best. So yeah, whatever about the fish, there's definitely something fishy happening here, you know, and as usual, and ever in this situation, at the end of the day, it's the taxpayer that's going to be left on the hook here. So, I mean, we have a serious background then in terms of, we've a corporate governance structure that's in free fall, mass resignations from the board, leaving a board that's inchoate and non-functioning, so that the minister has to step in and take a nuclear option essentially. We have a series of internal reports, we've protected disclosures, we've a Garda investigation relating to serious allegations of fraud, we've questions around dormant accounts funding, and we just have a sense here that taxpayers' money has been thrown around like snuff at a wake, if I'm honest. And then we have the wider context, and that ask for increased staffing. There's no doubt that the role and remit of IFI is changing and changing radically as we kind of respond to the urgency of the climate and the biodiversity crisis. We see increased pressures on our waterways, as you outlined in your opening statement. Our fish populations are in free fall as well. And I know Minister Ryan has called on you to be more ambitious, and there's a need for more ambition. And I think your business case to Mazars, you're talking about a 61% increase in terms of your staffing, so to go from the 320 or in around closer to 520. And I absolutely see the need for that level of ambition. And I'd love to be going to Minister O'Donoghue ahead of the budget and saying, look, IFI are asking for this extra ambition. You know, I support that, but it's difficult. And it's difficult as a member of the Oireachtas, it's difficult as a member of the PAC, and we have oversight of the spending of public money, to have confidence in an organisation and go make a case for increased funding. So look, there's a whole range of issues here, and I'm aware that time is limited. Mr. O'Donnell, I'm going to begin first with that issue around your work base and where you were working from. And I think there's questions here from Ms. Bradley as well and from Ms. Campion. So what I have in the Statement of Internal Control, and the Controller and Auditor General takes issue with how adequately this is reflected, is that the decision to move to Ballyshannon was based on the fact that it was closer to Galway. Now, I'm very fond of Donegal, but that is the first time I've ever seen anybody make a case of moving to Donegal because it was closer to anything. It might be closer to Galway, but I mean, Inland Fisheries Ireland also operates in my catchment area of Waterford. That is not close to Donegal. It was agreed, I believe, by the head of HR, so Ms. Bradley, you signed off on this. Can I ask for the rationale first?
The rationale for that was, I suppose it was 2021, Deputy. We're in the middle of a pandemic. As the chief of the organisation, I was asking my staff to stay at home, work from home, and work from regional bases if possible. I mean, we would have staff normally based in Dublin, for example, in the research department. They could be from Cork, could be from Waterford. We have 7 regional offices. It made absolutely no sense to ask them to come in and, to HQ. It was only open once a week at that point. So I was living in Donegal. I would only have access to secure IT systems 1 day a week. At that point in time, I was also I suppose, paying invoices on behalf of the taxpayer that ranged from 30,000 to 900,000. I didn't have a secure system at home to do that.
And you couldn't have opened up the secure system within Dublin? I mean, look, the case in point, my staff didn't travel to Dublin during the pandemic,
Deputy,
but I did.
Well, I would just like to explain, the office was only open 1 day a week, okay? So I would have to travel to Dublin once a week to undertake all of that work. Whereas in most cases I would need 2 to 3 days working in a secure environment because I was handling various different sensitive issues within IFI.
I will just point out that your Statement of Internal Control doesn't detail any of this.
It may not have detailed that.
And there's no contemporaneous written accounts.
But can I say, it was agreed at that time by the chairperson and the head of HR. It was agreed. Now, the CNAG pointed clearly out that it should have gone to a full board decision. It was done with the best of intent. There was no malice intended, and it was done for the right reasons. And as soon as it was pointed out by the CNAG, I took corrective action on that, and I accept that.
That decision only revert back to the Dublin HQ. That only happened when the Minister made the Section 18 appointees, am I right?
That's correct.
Okay.
The Section 18 appointees were their position on this was that once my base changed to Ballyshannon, my expenses were being signed off on by the then chair and obviously a second chair thereafter. And I suppose for the Section 18 appointees, they're concerned with the period from when they started.
Ms. Campion, can I ask the question about the financial implications of that move? How much did it cost the taxpayer?
Just over €5,000 in terms of the amount spent during the period that the base was in Donegal, and since the 2008 or since the Section 18s were appointed, €1,000 which has been repaid.
Okay, yeah, so up to 5,400 is the figure I have in front. Is that accurate? And 1,000 of it has been repaid.
1,000 of the amount that was claimed since the Section 18s were appointed, and that's the full amount that was due.
Okay. I want to move on to this issue around the protection team. And the protection teams, well, the protection teams in general, but the protection team in Ballyshannon, in County Donegal in particular. And there was a difficulty identified with the activity of that protection team. Would you care to outline? Well, it might be a question for yourself, Mr. O'Donnell, but Mr. Fox might have a
Deputy, can I defer to Roisin Bradley on this one?
Yeah, I suppose I don't think it's appropriate. I should say, first of all, that our teams are very small, and I don't think it's appropriate to call out one particular team. because the staff would be easily identifiable. What I would say to you is that...
But was there an investigation in the particular team? Was there not an internal process whereby
there's no performance investigation with regards to Ballyshannon team? No.
Where was there... Have I made an error there? Was there a performance investigation team in a different area?
No. What I would say to you is that there was some discussions about a number of areas around the country where they needed additional resources. So, for example, we'll choose the north because you've spoken about it. Our corporate plan had placed a focus on development, particularly around the assessment of barriers to fish migration and other development duties. Because our resources are so stretched, it's difficult to stretch them across the protection and the development. So there was some protection issues that I suppose we were concerned about. So we refocused the team. We put in a pilot scheme called a mobile support unit.
Mobile support
unit,
yeah.
Which basically put out a call of interest to staff if they wanted to participate, and the idea being that this would be a central mobile support unit that could go to any area in the country that needed additional resources. So just to be clear, there's no performance investigation into anyone in Ballyshannon.
Okay, I just want to turn to fleet management in particular. I think it's the second biggest expenditure outside of salaries. I understand the need for maintenance of fleet. I mean, your plant and equipment, the valuation comes to 21.4 million, which is substantial, but I can, to a certain extent, understand it. Just want to get the right page in front of me here. There's a question around how many vehicles are here. So, how many people do you have in the field? I know you have 320 employees. How many of those employees are in the field?
Slightly over 200.
Yeah. And then there's slightly over 200 vehicles.
I should say that there's also another 30 to 40 people in research, and they would also have vehicles as well.
Okay.
Because they do field work for 6 months of the year.
But we're pretty close to a 1-on-1 ratio in terms of vehicles too.
Yeah, I suppose what I would say to you is that we have we've done some research with other agencies which we believe would be quite like us in terms of the use of vehicles, namely the Gardaí. And this was at the time that we decided we wanted to bring in a telematics system so that we could monitor each of the vehicles. So we were asking them, like, how do you manage the vehicle utilisation? And they said, well, the vehicle is a tool, and we don't monitor the tool, we monitor the individual performance of the officer. So what I would say to you is that we do have 205 vehicles, but what I would say is that 31% of our fleet comprises of 4x4 crew cabs. These vehicles are utilised for specific heavy tow operations and off-road protection and development activities. 22% are SUVs, so for higher ground clearance and all-wheel drive, and 22% are cars and vans. And then we have a number of special types such as tractors and dumper trucks and stuff like that. So it's not a case that every employee has a vehicle.
No, look, we'd accept that, and the type of work that IFI does, I would accept the fact that there's a need for specialist vehicles. It just seems a very high ratio. It also seems that there's a very high figure included for general car hire, 350,000.
Yeah, I suppose again, we have done we spent a lot of time looking at what's the best way to meet the needs of the operations. In line with what type of vehicles we need. And I suppose what we say is because we have a kind of what we would consider a high season between March and September, October, which is when we bring in our seasonal staff. Our operations are out, so we've a lot more staff in that section of the organisation. Research are now out doing field work. And then obviously you have other staff then, such as say people in my team that might need to travel around the country. So we use pool cars. So the first thing I would say is that if somebody needed a vehicle to perform a duty, the first thing that they do is if they're in an operation team, there'll be a number of vehicles managed by the inspector locally. and if they're in research, usually there's either older vehicles that they use, or we would lease in vehicles, and a lot of times they're externally funded through the research funds that they would be carrying out the work for.
Just in broad strokes, because there's the guts of £500,000 that's been spent on fuel just for the cars. There's the 350,000 which has been spent on car hire. I mean, the size of the fleet means that depreciation is a very, very serious cost across and I understand that there's need for that. But what I find astonishing about it is that a fleet manager was actually only put in place, considering the size of the fleet, after somebody had a crash in an uninsured vehicle.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that.
But is the timeline wrong?
Oh no, let me just explain it insofar as we had what we called a logistics manager, and this logistics manager was responsible for fleet, which is cars, boats, trailers, and health and safety, and procurement, and facilities, and warehouses.
It's self-evident in the fact that there were 16 uninsured vehicles driving around the place, that there was a need for a fleet manager.
Sorry,
I just want to ask a follow-on question in terms of the climate commitments that you set out. So this is under, I have it someplace, I think it's high-level objective 4, and you talk about the type of reductions that we need to see in terms of carbon emissions across the organisation. As I said, the guts of £500,000 being spent on fuel for getting that extensive fleet around the place, and that's not actually counting the fuel for the ribs, which is a separate cost. And very significant amount of money being either spent on car hire or on the maintenance and the upgrade of the fleet. What steps are IFI taking in terms of electrification of fleet? Have we a significant component of electrical EVs now moving in?
We do. And I just want, it's a 22.5% of our fleet are electric, so we have 46 vehicles. Just to go back to say one thing, Deputy, just to remember that in 2021 we were still in the height of the pandemic, and with regard to vehicle occupancy, rules kept changing, and our staff were deemed to be essential workers. So we were doing everything we possibly could to make sure that our staff were out on the ground carrying out their job and doing it safely. So at certain points in the pandemic, we could actually only have one staff member in a car when normally we would have 4 or even sometimes 5. At other times we had screens in the car where we could have 2 people in the car, one in the front, a screen, and one in the back. So I suppose what I'd say is that in 2021, for example, we had, I think it was 102 lease cars. The following year we had 38. You know, so it's an unusual year, is what I'd say. I just want to say that, but I'll get back to your question now with regards to the electric vehicles.
A reply to that regarding the electric?
Sorry?
Did you want to finish that?
Yes, I did. Yes, sorry,
finish that,
apologies.
please. Yeah.
So 46 of our 46 cars in our fleet, so that's 22.5% are EVs, and they've travelled over 665,000 kilometres during the course of duty since 2019. We recognise that 70% of our emissions are attributed to our fleet, but we're very proud to say that we have made a 44.5% improvement in energy efficiency when compared to our baselines, which is an SEAI performance energy indicator. So we're a leader with regards to energy performance, and we're very proud of that fact.
Thank you. Deputy Colin Burke, 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. Can I just ask, just following up on the vehicle issue, this issue about the uninsured vehicles, there were 16 uninsured vehicles. Surely vehicles would have an indication that they are insured on their windscreen, and the other issue was about tax. I mean, how did that many? I could understand, it shouldn't happen, but 1 or 2, but this was 16. It was a substantial number of vehicles. Like, why? Surely there's checks and balances there, making sure that all vehicles are insured at all times.
There is now. So what I would say to you is that every year when we get our insurance policy, we obviously shop around to get best value for the public purse. In that year, we went with a company called LeasePlan. What part of the arrangements or part of the requirements was to contact them when any car went onto fleet. So obviously if the car on our fleet that doesn't come up, our permanent cars, they're on at the beginning of the year, they don't change, right? Unless we buy new vehicles. That year in 2021, as I said, we had 103 lease cars. Now, that doesn't mean they're not all brought on at the same time and taken off at the same time. That's 2 cars.
Isn't that a complicated way of dealing with it? Say, for instance, if you member of your staff suddenly needs a car at 6 o'clock in the evening, how then do you cover insurance?
Sorry, give me that question again.
If someone suddenly requires a vehicle at 6 o'clock in the evening, their existing vehicle isn't functioning and they need to follow up something urgently, and are you saying to me that if they suddenly get a vehicle at 6 o'clock in the evening, they're not covered by insurance?
No.
Because you won't be able to get onto the insurance company there and then.
No. Usually if somebody, we have a 24-hour requirement to get a vehicle, so if you knew you needed a vehicle for tomorrow, you'd contact our field services team, and they would organise a vehicle, the first being to try and see if there's a vehicle.
If there was an emergency arose,
if an emergency, if the short term.
But surely the policy needs to be looked at from the point of view of that there's a cover there, without necessarily having to identify the vehicle. That's in place now, and that was not the case
That
before.
wasn't the case at the time.
And just in relation to the issue that there was money spent trying to make the insurance retrospective, I mean, surely that money spent was, my understanding you engaged a firm of solicitors to deal with that, and there was a cost incurred when, you can't make insurance retrospective.
No, I don't believe that was the case.
You did engage a firm of solicitors.
Yeah, I suppose what I would say to you is that when we obviously didn't know that these vehicles were uninsured, how we became aware of it when the accident happened.
But if an accident didn't happen, you could still have those 16 vehicles going around uninsured.
For the period of time that they were on a short-term lease, for the period, you're absolutely right. We wouldn't have known.
And you're satisfied that you've enough checks and balances there now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So just to say to you that now. Vehicles must, the arrangement we have with the vehicle, with the insurer, with AXA, is that the notification period, right, isn't immediate, and all our cars are registered on the national vehicle database. So so this situation can't happen. The lease plan insurance policy, you needed to tell the insurer before the car was driven that it was on the policy. The current policy doesn't require that notification.
And just in respect of insurance for premises, for boats, all the rest of it, are you satisfied now that you have adequate procedures in place to make sure that a slip-up like this does not arise again?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, there's 2 things. One, we put in a fleet manager who is solely responsible for boats, cars and trailers, and also the insurance, and he also has 2 staff working with him.
And are you satisfied that you have adequate insurance for buildings that you own as regards public liability? And remember, insurance is any one event, so if you have 10 people injured in one accident, then the limit is for the 10 people rather than 10 individual claims.
No, as I said, we absolutely apologise for what happened, but
I'm specific about insurance, about limit of liability. Are you satisfied that you have adequate cover in relation to limit of liability?
Yes.
Okay. Can I move on to a totally different issue, and that's in relation to legal costs incurred, and the process for engaging. Obviously in prosecutions you have to engage with people. Are you satisfied that you have adequate procedures there as regards getting value for money in relation to legal costs?
Yes, Deputy. We do legal tender through e-tenders. We have appointed 15 different solicitors as our solicitors in the 2021 accounts. I suppose they give us the best rates available, and they are based throughout the country to deal with the different prosecution matters that come up in the different regions. As well as that, we have some, I suppose, Dublin-based solicitors as well that deal with more corporate.
And can I just ask you in relation to, there's a judicial review case that you've taken.
That's correct.
I mean, are you satisfied, was this a board decision to take that judicial review, and what stage is that judicial review at now, and what is the likely cost to the Fisheries Board for that judicial review?
Deputy, at this moment in time, I'm just conscious that I'll answer your second part of your question afterwards. Obviously the case has been heard. It's been written up by the judge at the moment. So, and we had full support of the board to undertake that process.
But the start of it was actually, it was a board decision.
It was a board decision.
Because the reason I'm asking this question about this one is I've been involved or have seen a scenario where the Fisheries Board objected to a planning commission for a school,
okay,
and took it all the way to Clonmore, even though the school gave a commitment to the Fisheries Board. And I reckon that that delay has cost 2 million to the project. Is there a policy in relation to engaging on environmental issues with issues like schools, like local authorities, where there's a concern about the Fisheries Board?
I would respond to that by saying, Deputy, I think we would always try and find a solution in terms.
But in this case, there wasn't, because the issue basically was the sewage treatment facility in a small local community. The Fisheries Board felt it wasn't adequate for the school. The school was already connected, the old school was already connected to the system. And the school gave an undertaking that they would not increase the number of pupils. Yet the Fisheries Board took it all the way to Clonmore and delayed the project for over 18 months.
Okay.
And I'm saying to you, is there a policy within the Fisheries Board about dealing with issues like that?
I mean, our policy would be to be pragmatic at all times and to try and find a solution. But the particular case that you're talking about, I'm not familiar with it. I haven't seen the file on it. So it's difficult for me to speak to that. I don't know if there's anybody.
I'm asking you, is there a policy? Because in this case, it went all the way to Clonmore at a cost to the Department of Education and to the local community.
On these particular issues, there would not be a written policy.
Isn't it about time that there is a written policy? Because this is, and I fully understand the Fisheries Board. I fully understand the Fisheries Board wanting to protect the environment, and I fully understand that. But what I'm saying to you in this case, there wasn't engagement, and even where the school authorities tried to have that engagement, it was a closed door.
What I would say is we have a stakeholder policy, and I mean, I believe, as a senior person in the executive, as my colleagues do, that we would always engage. And like any public service organisation, you may have a policy around an issue, you may have a statutory remit, but you often have obviously discussions with other agencies around trying to find solutions, because nobody, our organisation, nobody wants to see a public service organisation not working in close cooperation with another. So I'm more than prepared to look at this and to speak to you about this afterwards. I'm just not familiar with it, Deputy.
And can I just ask, in relation to coordination between local authorities and the Fisheries Board, are you satisfied that there's enough processes in place so that there's a maximum benefit from your point of view and the delivery of the service that you're trying to provide? Are you satisfied that there is adequate processes in place for that engagement to be ongoing?
We engage, Deputy, at the highest level with county councils, city councils, on a whole range of issues. We would also, I mean, LawPro obviously are part of the, I suppose, the county council system, and we would engage with them on a regular basis around water quality issues, catchment issues, habitat restoration. So the answer would be yes.
Okay. And can I just ask you, you're talking about staff, and I fully understand you've a lot of territory to cover, and in relation to environmental issues, do you feel that at this stage it would be helpful if you had additional staff to help out in that particular area? In relation to, because the Fisheries Board is obviously watching developments all of the time, because they're obviously, because the way you've already explained how fish stocks have decreased substantially, therefore you would be watching future developments. Are you satisfied that you have sufficient staff to deal with that issue so that there can be that coordination between yourselves, local authorities, and developing projects?
I think we're understaffed, Deputy, in this area. I identified that when I came back to IFI a number of years ago. What we're finding now is that our environmental officers in particular are basically, I suppose for the want of a better word, becoming locked into the office, reviewing planning applications all of the time and reviewing environmental assessments. And in the past, they would have spent more time in the field, they would have detected more issues, they would have taken remedial action in relation to more issues and more prosecutions if it was necessary to do that. But we find that, I think I said it in my opening statement, Deputy, the ecological world we're in, if it's changing all the time, it's getting very complex. and we find that our specialists now are reviewing applications from other agencies, from private companies, and it's bogging us down. And I suppose that is why myself and Roisin Bradley, my colleagues here in the SMT, did work on that business case. We have identified that as a weakness in the organisation. So thank you.
Deputy Cormac Devlin.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Mr. O'Donnell, and your colleagues for your opening statement. I suppose, like my colleague, Deputy O'Cosig, I just would prefer to have talked about the fish today. I think your corporate strategy, I think you signed off in 2020. I think you began as Chief Exec in 2020.
In 2020, that's correct.
So, you know, there's a number of challenges that you've highlighted in your own remarks, and we should really be discussing those and indeed the accounts for 2021, but obviously there are other more pressing issues. In terms of the resignations, so there were 6 resignations from the board over the last little while, including the chairperson, and then there was a number of disclosures. Is there an issue at the board, between the board and the executive of IFI?
Well, I suppose just to respond to that firstly, it's publicly known that a number of board members did resign from the board.
High number.
Yeah, I wouldn't have got sight of the resignation letters. They would have been directly to the Minister himself, Minister Eamon Ryan. I think with any board and any executive, there's a waxing and waning. I think that it should never get too comfortable. I think it's important that as an executive that we're challenged, but equally as an executive that we're not afraid to ask questions or raise issues or matters of concern. And I think it's a very healthy environment to be in. But I can only speak about my own relationship with board members in IFI. I felt I had a very professional and good working relationship with board members. They may not necessarily have the same opinion, but I can't speak to that. But that would be my view, Deputy.
And so the previous chairperson and then the new chairperson that was appointed, who resigned a year later, you're saying you had a good working relationship with both?
I did have, yes.
Okay. I mean, to me, I think it's quite. It paints a different picture here for us. I mean, all this played out in the public domain, as you can appreciate. And you're right, everything went to the Minister, and really from the Oireachtas perspective, we heard that the Minister was taking action in terms of IFI. But really, from what you're saying this morning, doesn't necessarily chime, and I think you can appreciate why, with what we are seeing. Because there's clearly a problem. There's a problem somewhere, and that will obviously come out in the wash. Can I ask Ms. Bradley, as head of HR, then, in terms of the morale with the staff? How many staff do you have at present in IFI?
So just under 320.
320?
Well, depending on the time of year. Like at the moment, we have obviously our seasonal staff in, so that puts it up by another 50. So.
And overall in the organisation, what's the morale like?
I wouldn't say it's particularly good at the moment. I would say that staff are feeling very deflated.
And what are the main reasons do you reckon for that?
Sorry?
What are the main reasons do you think for that?
I think because of all the stuff that's played out in the public. Well, I want to say just very quickly that I'm working in the organisation 5 years. It's my first time working in the public sector, and our staff are one of the most amazing groups of people I've ever worked with. Their vocation to what they do is unbelievable, and it's palpable. I mean, it really is. They go above and beyond every day, and I think what they found so difficult was that all of this stuff was playing out in the media, and yet they were saying, well, like, what about us? What about all the, it kind of puts a tarnish on the jobs that they do, and I think that's been very difficult.
So what actions have you taken, I suppose, as HR and indeed the wider organisation to try and arrest that problem and try and motivate staff, I suppose, to as the good work that they do?
Yeah. Well, we put together a wellbeing team. We actually got we got commitment from both the board and the executive to go for the Keep Well mark, so that we would have some kind of, you know, I suppose
benchmark.
Yeah, exactly.
And when did that start?
So we started that in late 2021, and we got the award in 2022.
Okay.
And then we're actually rolling out an employee survey through an external body in September.
Okay. And can I ask the CNAG, just following on from his opening statements this morning, in terms of the 2021 accounts, when did the audit begin for the 2021?
In 22. Yeah, around this time in 22. I can get the exact dates
okay.
For you.
Okay, and then in terms of, I suppose, going to the issue from what Mr. O'Donnell had said in terms of when the issue was flagged about the change of the base for his workplace, when did that become apparent during the audit, roughly?
Again, I'd have to check that. I know that the file came to me in December of 2022. There obviously had been a lot of issues surfaced. Each of the issues took some time. So it was in December, I think around the 12th of December, that I cleared
yes.
the issues. But I think they would have been raised prior to that with staff members in IFI.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Donnell, then, in terms of your decision to change back to Dublin, when did that take place?
Well, I got into negotiations straight away with the two Section 18 appointees, our two board members. Once was pointed out by the CNAG.
Do you have an idea roughly when that came to you?
I certainly took a mental decision 6 or 8 weeks ago to do that, but I wrote to the two board members officially probably a fortnight ago to say that my base had
So it's just very recent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Deputy, can I just say, and it's important for me to say this here today, it was done for very genuine reasons, but I had no issue when it was pointed out by the CNAG. And I believe that if I'd gone to a full board decision at the time, that there would have been no issue with that. And I regret that I didn't do that.
But there are no notes, though, isn't it? Is that right?
Well, there's a letter from the head of HR, Roisin Bradley, to the HR department, and I'm just going to read this letter, if that's okay. Dear Mr. O'Donnell, I can confirm that your normal place of work, as specified in your 5-year fixed-term contract as Chief Executive Officer, is changing from the City West Business Campus to the Ballyshannon office, effective immediately.
And what date is that letter, Mr.
That letter is the 3rd November 21. The arrangement is made in line with Section 2.2 and 2.3 of your contract. See page 2 of your fixed-term contract dated the 2nd of the 11th 20. All other terms and conditions of your employment remain unchanged. If you have any queries in relation to the content of this letter, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. So it wasn't something that just happened. There was a discussion between the chairman, myself, and head of HR, and that was the letter that I got.
Now, was that the original chairman? Was that the original chairman of the?
Yes, it was the original chairman, and I appreciate that there's no other written record on this issue.
Okay. So in terms of just the timeline there, you know, there was very little written evidence of it, I think was the phrase. We found no contemporaneous written record of the proposed for work location change or its financial implications, or a decision in that regard by the board, which is responsible for setting the terms and conditions of the Chief Executive. That's quoting the CNAG's opening statement. And if the audit started and it was notified around December to the CNAG in December 2022, your letter that you've read out is the 3rd of November 2021.
Yes, that's correct.
And so, to me, you know, I think one letter, fine, and I think Miss Campion has said the cost was 5,400. Is that overall? I think it's probably in the round, irrespective of the amount of money and the way in which it was done. I think couple that with the issues around the fleet management or lack of management of the fleet and other issues that we're discussing today, I think it points to either a laissez-faire approach within the organisation to items, or indeed, you know, something more sinister than that. And I think from our perspective as a Public Accounts Committee, you can appreciate why we would be very interested in various items that have arisen, not only at board level, but indeed the management of various items within the organisation. And I suppose from where I'm sitting, I think the overall management of the organisation, which ultimately stops with yourself as Chief Executive, you know, there's a litany of issues here, And as I said at the outset, we prefer to discuss the challenges that the organisation faces externally rather than internally. But there's quite a few internal issues that we're discussing today. Would you agree?
Well, I wouldn't agree with some of your comments. I'd have to say I don't think we take a laissez-faire attitude to anything in IFI, and I have brought a significant number of governance issues to the attention of the board since I became CEO in 2020. There was nothing sinister about my base change. I have to say that word sinister, it's like a predetermined that I went about this in some kind of a sneaky way. I did not do that. I've said it and I'll state it again for the record. This was agreed with the chairman at the time and the head of HR. The CNAG are correct. It should have gone to a full board decision. But if it was a sinister thing, I would have just done this myself and not asked for permission to do this. And my expenses were paid thereafter and signed off by the then chair. So I think it's important for the public watching this here today. It's not a laissez-faire attitude we have. We do have problems. We've apologised. We're absolutely upfront about them, and we need to get through this bottleneck. We have two excellent board members working along with us at the moment. Significant, great experience, and they're going to do their governance review that's going to help us. And public service organisations make mistakes, humans make mistakes, and we're here to answer for them. We have no issue. But just the word sinister, I have to object to that.
Deputy John Brady.
I'd like to welcome our guests here this afternoon or this morning. I just want to ask the question just in relation to Mr. O'Donnell, and when you described that you had a good working relationship with the board members, would that be accurate? Yeah. And can I ask then, in terms of what is being portrayed publicly, that there was open civil war between the executive and the board, would you agree there was civil war?
I don't believe that there was civil war at all, and I think that the media presented it in a particular way, and I suppose we're all here, we all know that people have various strategies.
Media portrayed it a certain way. I mean,
Yeah.
5 board members resigned. They didn't resign because they thought there was a great relationship between the executive and the board.
I can't speak to that because I'm not actually sure why those board members resigned. They would have resigned directly to Minister Eamon Ryan. I would not have cited that.
Okay.
So I can't speak to that
Can I
point.
ask Mr. Maher then, just in relation to, and I'm not going to ask you to get into the detail of any content in resignation letters, but those resignation letters would have been received by the Minister and the Department. I'll be right in saying that, would it? Yes. Yeah.
Some related to pressure of work, but I think our Secretary General wrote to this committee a little while ago in relation to correspondence received from the committee in terms of clarification, and quite clearly says in relation to the resignations that there was a breakdown in relationships. That means inter-board relationships. Okay, so that's important to emphasise that the executive I think follows the direction of the board, but if the board is not indeed that's a problem. But this is in a letter to the committee chair and deputy. But I can take any other questions.
Can I just ask in terms of the minister's move to remove the 3 remaining board members, on what basis was that done, or why? I mean, we're being told there was no basis, it was on a no-fault basis. Why were those removed, Mr. Martin?
Well, again, it's contained in that letter to the committee, but there are functions reserved to the board, very important functions, in terms of strategy, in terms of finance, in terms of signing off on certain levels of procurement, all of that. We exercise corporate governance over IFI, not in the day-to-day operational sense, but on the bigger issues. If there's a board decision that requires further, for instance, the sanction of DPER to carry out the action, I would be charged with going to see that, going to secure that. And also, our governance relates to the code of practice for the governance of state bodies and compliance with the Act of 2010. Those are important things.
Okay,
But there were a number of
Mr.
functions which are listed in the Secretary General's letter which just couldn't be progressed.
Okay.
And if they weren't progressed, it would be very detrimental to IFI.
Okay, thank you. Just in relation to protected disclosures, can I ask how many protected disclosures have been made to the Minister?
I'm sorry, Deputy, I'm not privy to that because there was a specialised unit in the department. It wouldn't be appropriate for me as the head of Inland Fisheries Division to have any impact on there. But again, it's detailed in written correspondence to the committee that the disclosures remain at various points of completion. I'm sure that once they're completed, within the terms of the 2014 Act and obviously our own policies, and those disclosures made to IFI within their own, if matters can be forwarded to the committee,
can I just ask the question around dormant accounts? And there was an allocation of 30,000 that was refunded back to dormant accounts due to governance issues with the grant process. So can I ask that IFA review all grant applications as a result of the disclosure, or only a sample? So what process on foot of the governance issues that were highlighted in terms of that 30,000 that had to be refunded? Mr. Riddle.
I suppose the review that you're talking about, which recommended the refund or a proportion of the 30,000 be refunded, that if I might think about that, looked at grants to the amount of 924,000 to IFI. IFI were absolutely privileged to have dormant account funding to work with, and we're absolutely regret that there's any queries around it at all. However, as it stands, that review looked at all the money that was given to us. It included the various different programs and measures that were there in those 2 years, so 2019 and 2020. In effect, that, I suppose, 924,000 is about 75-78% of the total amount of grants that were given down to us. So the bit that wasn't looked at was the following year. In relation to the breakdown of that funding, so it was Go Fishing, it was Angling for All grants, the Novice Angler Activation. It looked at all amounts of money over 5,000 that were dispersed to third parties. It found these particular payments. IFI had a rationale for actually including them in it, and I suppose if you look at what they're about, Leave No Trace is about people in the environment. That's what the programme was about. It was about bringing people into the environment and to ensure that they wouldn't leave any trace after them. The visitor safety in the countryside, again, was looking at keeping all those people that we were intending to bring out safe in the countryside. So we were dealing with, the daft target groups, disadvantaged, education disadvantaged, and people with a disability.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Campion. I'm just conscious of the time here. Apologies. I just want to move on. Just in relation to Ashley Lodge, I think, am I right in the pronunciation of that? And just that particular property was leased to a staff member on an informal basis. I'm right in saying that. It has been disclosed that it was being operated as a guest house. I'm right in saying that.
I'll take that, Deputy. No, well, I suppose, can I go back a little bit and I'll try and answer all of your questions. I suppose in 2000...
maybe just a yes or a no on those points first.
Well, I don't think it was informal. There was a contractual arrangement in place with the employee, but the mistake started in 2017. I want to get to the nub of the issue here. The then regional...
Mistake started when?
In 2017. What I'm saying here is that at that point there was an internal call in IFI. Obviously a tendering process to see if anybody internally was interested in leasing the property. That should never have happened. That was a mistake, and I think it was sort of a cascading effect thereafter, because the property was for sale. it was going to be very, very, very difficult to get anybody to actually tender to lease the property because there was a condition there where you had to vacate the property within 10 working weeks if IFI actually managed to sell the property. But it was a mistake. It was a governance mistake, and we regret that happened. In 2021, when I reviewed the files and went back through some documentation, I realised that it hadn't been done on a national capacity, the tendering process, and I immediately brought it to the board's attention.
Okay, so how many properties similar to that would IFI have?
No, we have two. I think just so that there's clarity around this issue, Ashley Lodge has 2 properties, 3 properties actually. There's 2 self-catering cottages, Deputy. There's actually a working base on the property. And then there's Ashley Lodge itself, the house that was given to the state by the Brayburns in 1984 after the murder of Lord Mountbatten.
Okay, so just I'm conscious of the time. I just want to move on to the fraud investigation that you alluded to by the Gardaí. And look, I'm very conscious that it is a live investigation. So without identifying any individuals, would you be in a position to provide some context around the various issues that the fraud or alleged fraud relates to?
Deputy and Chair, I'm just conscious that
ask you to be cautious, be brief.
Anything I say here, could identify somebody. We've known about it since 2022, I was of the opinion that it had occurred from reviewing internal paperwork and I suppose looking at timesheets and rosters associated with certain staff. Having looked at it very, very carefully, I was quite sure that something very significant had happened.
You reported the incidents to the Gardaí after a second review was carried out in September 2022.
I reported the matter first to the Gardaí in July, and I went back and I made a 25-page statement in September.
Okay.
That's as much as Chair. I have to be very careful.
And I want you to be cautious with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy.
Okay, so just say to people, just say to members as well, be careful with language around words like sinister. It does have certain connotations. We're going to take Deputy Verona Murphy and then we'll break for 10 minutes. Okay? Deputy Verona.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to start with Ms. Bradley. In relation to the 16 uninsured vehicles, which is actually to have a vehicle on the road, Ms. Bradley, it's a criminal offence to have it on it without insurance. Was there any prosecution in that regard?
No. Was against inland fisheries, is it?
Yeah.
No.
So there was no prosecution brought for having a vehicle uninsured?
No.
On the public highway?
No.
That's strange. Were you asked to present documents?
No.
Okay, was there a Garda involved? Were the Gardaí called?
So obviously how we became aware that the vehicles were uninsured was when the accident occurred, and obviously we contacted our insurance company, right? But the Gardaí haven't.
How long ago did the incident take place?
It happened in August 2021.
That's the time for issuing any prosecution. You are aware that somebody in the organisation would be held responsible from a criminal perspective?
We do. I mean, we are.
So what have you done apart from employing a fleet manager?
Yes.
Has there been training in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a full review was done both in terms of the administration resources that needed to be done, but apart from that, we also made sure that we put in a fail-safe so that this cannot happen again.
Okay, so just to be clear, there was nobody in IFI made a statement on Garda Síochána with regards to the no insurance matter?
We weren't asked to, no.
Okay, that's fine. And just to go back then to the maintenance, like it is quite, I wouldn't equate a logistics manager with a fleet manager ever, but however, seen as the same person seemed to be doing 2 jobs. I note in some of our reports that the idea of the telematics was that you would incorporate fuel and other services from them, is that correct?
Yeah, so basically the idea was that it was like a dual relationship with lease.
So you bought a package?
Yeah, we had a
Right.
maintenance and insurance with them.
And it does say vehicle fuel. So do telematics provide you with fuel cards?
No, so we have our fuel cards through Circle K.
Circle K.
Yeah.
And so how many fuel cards do you have?
Oh, God, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Would each vehicle have a fuel card?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But,
okay.
but we would also have fuel cards for boats and for certain equipment that would require diesel to operate them.
Okay. And so would the chief executive, for instance, have a fuel card?
I would have a fuel card.
You would have a fuel card and the chief executive?
Yeah.
Okay. How long has the chief executive a fuel card?
Well, I don't know actually if he has a fuel card. I have one.
He's nodding,
I'll check
so I
it.
presume that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. O'Donnell.
I have a fuel card, and I think since about 2019 or early 2020, when I started first within Fisheries Ireland as regional director. And just for clarity, I use my car for work purposes only. I don't use it for any private use. We have a policy internally that prohibits that.
You use your card or car?
No, sorry. I use my car, and obviously the card for work purposes only, for operational reasons. For
Just a second now. I just slow down for one
Oh,
second.
sorry. Okay.
So the car you have, is it a personal car or is it an IFI vehicle?
It's an IFI vehicle.
Okay. For which you have a fuel card.
I have a fuel card, yes.
Okay. So when you were claiming subsistence, did you ever use that fuel card? And can we have a record? You're saying that you have the card since 2020?
I have it since I started in IFI, yes.
And you didn't use it obviously when you were claiming subsistence, and we'll be able to get a record of that.
That's not how it works. I would just claim the normal.
Well, hold on. Why would you claim existence if IFI subsistence?
I don't claim travel. You just claim an overnight. They're two different components of,
Right.
of the TNS system.
So let's clear that up. So
Yeah.
your travel, you were claiming an overnight. You had no mileage.
You're correct.
You had no mileage claim.
I have never claimed mileage. I go in and I use my card for IFI business, and that's it. It goes directly centrally back then to our finance section.
But clearly, if you'd fill the IFI car with the fuel card.
Of course.
Yeah, and you don't use that outside the business.
Of course I don't.
Perfect. So moving back to that then, can we, you obviously have huge oversight of the fact that Mr. O'Donnell would have a vehicle but that he uses for work only. Yeah. So how do you have telematics information then?
You do. Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. So just then, Mr. O'Donnell, to go back to from the information we received was that there was no record. I know you've subsequently read out a HR letter, but that letter came after the fact from our investigation or the CNAG's investigation. Was that letter posted to you, emailed to you? How did you receive? Where did you find that? That it hadn't been submitted initially?
Well, I don't know whether I got it in the post or I got it by email. I couldn't honestly answer that question. But I think it was sent by my colleague Russian Bradley, and she might be able to.
Okay, Ms. Bradley.
Can I just I just want to explain how this came about, because I think it's going to be slightly.
No, I really just need to know
Okay.
when the letter, where the letter was that the CNAG hadn't received it.
Okay, so the letter was, as far as I remember, but I'd have to double check, I printed out a hard copy of it so I could put it in his file and left it on his desk, and I also scanned a copy of it to him, and I was obviously CC'd by the chairman, but that wasn't after the fact, it was at the time.
It was after the fact of our report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I take it, sorry, I'll just clarify that with the CNAG.
No, the letter that we're talking about was the 3rd of November 2021. That was a notification to the chief executive that his base had changed. So that happened at the time that the change was made. A year later, we were carrying out the audit and we were looking for where is the business case underpinning it. And the only document that was available to us for audit purposes was the notification to the chief executive that his base had been changed.
Which really wouldn't suffice from the point of view.
It wasn't sufficient, in my view, when the change of base should have been a decision of the board. And I was looking for evidence of the board's decision in relation to the change of base in 2021.
And now, so that's been explained. Can you explain to me, without, in the absence of a board making that decision, why did you go ahead and then revert and repay the subsistence?
Because as a public servant, if the CNAG points something out to you, and they're of the view, a strong view, that the process around my change of base wasn't correct, that it should have gone to a full board decision, then I'm duty bound to lead properly and not be one bit afraid to do this and to say, okay, if I had known that I had to do that at the time, I would have gone to the full board and got a decision to do it. Okay.
Now, Mr. O'Donnell, a man of your experience, you're telling me that you needed the just to be clear, you needed the CNAG to advise that it wasn't proper practice.
Well,
in line with public service guidelines, that you would just change your address.
Can I respond to that? The chairperson of the board,
but there must be a code of conduct,
and the head of HR agreed to this change.
Well, the chair of the board, when you say the chair of the board agreed to it, yes. Where have we seen that?
But that is correct, and the CNAG have pointed that out.
Who was the chair of the board at the time?
Well, Fintan Gorman was the chair of the board.
And you're saying here categorically under oath that he agreed to your change of work.
Not alone did he.
You just said
yes, not alone did he agree, Deputy. He signed off on my expenses, which would have been from the Ballyshannon base thereafter. So there is
nothing in writing. There was nothing put in writing.
But there may have been nothing in writing, but he did agree to it. There's no possible way that I could have operated from the Ballyshannon base without at least getting agreement. And I had the letter from Deputy Riley.
On that basis, I mean, would you not say to yourself, you didn't, like, why did you feel the need to pay back the subsistence if you were categoric in that you didn't do it unilaterally? You had Mr. The former chair.
Because the CNAG pointed it out. I sat down when the two Section 18 board members were appointed. They considered the issue. They were aligned with the CNAG on it.
Oh, I'm sure they were.
No, they were aligned with the CNAG on it. And I took the corrective action. Would you not have wanted me to do that?
Of course I would. I just wonder why it took so long and why it needed to be pointed out to someone in your position. Why that needed to be pointed out. I mean, these are basic rules in relation to public office.
I go back to 2021. It's about context here as well, Deputy. I mean, I was asking everybody in IFI at that point in time not to go to HQ, not to go to a regional office, work from home if you possibly could. That's really important. When your office is only open one day a week,
different times, I agree.
You know, and I think.
And just to go back, just one quick question.
Very briefly.
Whilst that was one error, there was an accumulation of errors that makes IFI look like a basket case. For a start, the no insurance on the vehicles, something that I would find incredible, to be honest, as someone who has operated as a haulier for years. It is a jailable offence. The other thing is that the leasing of the cottage, you were aware of that?
Sure, I have just informed the other deputy.
I know, but you would take responsibility that there was a comedy of errors within IFI.
I think when over a time period, organisations make governance mistakes, right? And the difficulty with IFI was when these governance issues were brought, I suppose, to the attention of the minister and the public, they all came out at the one time.
But do you take any responsibility for that?
But why should I take responsibility? My responsibility at this point in time is to be here in front of this committee today.
As the CEO, I just asked, would you take any responsibility for all of those errors?
Well, I wasn't here for many of them, so I couldn't take responsibility for them. But I'm taking responsibility now to tighten up on governance and to get us through this bottleneck in the organisation. That is my job.
So you would be happy that there is nobody claiming travel subsistence within the organisation, but that would have the use of a fuel card categorically?
Well, absolutely should not be.
No, but you would have already stated that, obviously, to employees that shouldn't happen. Given your own brush with subsistence and repaying money, there would probably have been a sit down with everybody to say we need to have the height of good governance here and conduct
We have a telematics system.
That only is.
No, it's very, very important, Debbie. I just
right, I don't want anyone confused about what a telematics system
no,
does.
but Chair, can I say?
Sorry, no, it's just for a second.
Yeah.
I'm chairing the meeting here. Okay. Just allow him to give an answer. We'll keep it brief. Okay. I want to allow Ms. Brantley has indicated 3 times she wishes to go in and come in briefly as well. Just clarify that point.
When a
some clarification.
When a fuel card is used in IFI, we can there and then, or sometime thereafter, see whether that vehicle that the fuel card is assigned to was at that petrol station. And I do reviews, and I have done significant reviews on that in relation to an investigation that I'm assisting in.
So you'd cross-check if there was any form of subsistence claim with fuel purchased, you cross-check that all the time?
I do cross-checks, and I have done cross-checks, but I don't want to go into that indefinite in relation to what I spoke about earlier.
Just briefly, Ms. Brantley, I know you were anxious to come in.
We've taken a lot of learnings from what's happened, and not only did we, as I said, put in a robust, new administration support system and the policy and all the rest of it, but we also conducted a number of mandatory sessions with staff to remind them of the fleet policy and the subsistence and more importantly about fuel cards and how they should be used and monitored and all that kind of stuff.
So you would be quite happy to state here categorically that there could be no cross between a claim for subsistence and use of the fuel cards. That's correct. Thank you, Chair.
So we're going to do now, we're going to break for 10 minutes and I'd ask people to be straight back in 10 minutes.
Chair, one small thing.
Just for
I think that
very briefly.
Sorry, no, it's just maybe for the record, it may not be that important. Unless I heard it wrong, I think the CNAG may have stated that the Inland Fisheries Ireland headquarters was in Donegal. It's actually in Dublin, but it's just for the transcript of the meeting. That's all. And I apologise if I misheard you.
Okay, Mr. O'Donnell, can I just clarify from my own head? You have a sub-office you do have offices in regional offices in
we have all around the country.
Yeah, just to familiarise yourself with it, that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the one that you were using during the COVID period, okay? Thanks for that clarification. So it's suspended for 10 minutes. Be back in here because we're starting in 10 minutes, right?